Good evening, Virgo. Mm, there's someone who's been woven into your story from the very beginning, isn't there? A presence that feels less like random encounter and more like inevitable convergence. Like your paths were always going to cross at exactly the moment they did. And what you've been experiencing with this person carries a weight, a significance that you can't quite explain through logic, but feel undeniably in your bones. Let me share what I'm perceiving in the karmic architecture surrounding you right now. The first thing breaking through is this recognition you might be having that your connection with someone feels different from every other relationship you've experienced. You could be picking up on quality of familiarity that shouldn't exist given how long you've actually known them. Ease that typically takes years to develop, but somehow was present from first conversation. You might be sensing that you've known this person before, not necessarily in literal past life sense, though that's possible, but in deeper way where your souls recognize each other across time and space, where something ancient and essential in you responds to something equally ancient in them. Here's what you could be observing in how this connection unfolds. You might be noticing that obstacles that would have ended other relationships somehow get navigated with this person, that conflicts resolve more easily, that misunderstandings clear more quickly, that what would be deal breakers with others become opportunities for deeper intimacy. You could be picking up on resilience in this bond, awareness that despite challenges or distances or complications, you keep finding your way back to each other like magnets that can be temporarily separated but inevitably pull back together because the attraction operates at level beyond conscious choice. What's reverberating through the soul contracts is that you could be dealing with the person who's seen you at your worst and hasn't left. You might be sensing that you've been witnessed in your darkness, your dysfunction, your moments of being decidedly unlovable. And instead of running, this person has stayed, has held space, has somehow loved you through and because of your complexity rather than despite it. You could be picking up on being known at depth most people never reach. And that kind of thorough seeing, when it doesn't result in rejection, creates safety you've never experienced before. This reflection invites you to consider what you've been defending against receiving from this person, because accepting how deeply they see and value you would require you to release protective stories about being fundamentally unlovable. And whether maintaining those stories serves you better than risking the vulnerability of believing you could actually be cherished exactly as you are. You might be noticing that you're experiencing this person as mirror for parts of yourself you've been denying or haven't fully developed. You could be picking up on ways they reflect back your potential, showing you versions of yourself that are stronger, more authentic, more aligned than who you've been being. You might be sensing that this relationship functions as catalyst for growth, that you're called to evolve in their presence, not because they're demanding you change, but because their regard for you activates desire to become more fully yourself. And that evolutionary pressure, uncomfortable as it sometimes is sign of relationships serving your soul's development rather than just your ego's comfort. What's pulsing through the destiny lines is that you could be dealing with timing that's felt frustrating but has actually been perfect. You might be sensing that you met this person at exact moment you needed to, not when you wanted to, not according to timeline you would have chosen, but precisely when you'd both developed capacity to actually meet each other, rather than just projecting fantasies onto convenient bodies. You could be picking up on divine orchestration, on way delays and detours served purpose of preparing you both for a relationship that wouldn't have been sustainable if it had started earlier, and trusting that timing serves rather than sabotages you helps you release resentment about waiting for what you sensed was meant for you. What's particularly striking about what I'm witnessing is that you might be experiencing this person as choosing you consistently. You could be picking up on their regard for you not being contingent on your performance, not dependent on you being perfect or convenient or easy. You might be sensing steadiness in their presence that doesn't waver based on your mood or your mistakes or your moments of pushing them away is less than has home. Zero hash is greater than. And that unconditional quality, rare and precious, is both healing old wounds around conditional love and frightening because it asks you to believe you're worthy of being chosen simply for being yourself. You might be observing that other people notice something special about your dynamic with this person. You could be experiencing comments from friends or family who see chemistry you share, who remark on how different you seem together, who express that you seem meant for each other in ways they can't quite articulate but clearly perceive. You might be picking up on external validation of what you've been sensing internally. And while you don't need others' approval, having trusted people reflect back that yes, this connection is remarkable, this is real, this is different, that confirmation helps you trust your own perception against internal doubt that tells you you're making it all up. What's threading through the relational DNA is that you could be dealing with a person whose love language you understand intuitively. You might be sensing that you don't have to translate or interpret their care, that how they show affection lands directly, that their efforts to demonstrate regard for you are received without confusion. You could be picking up on natural fluency in each other's emotional dialects. And that ease of being understood, of understanding in return, is creating intimacy that develops rapidly because you're not wasting energy on miscommunication that characterizes relationships where people speak fundamentally different languages. This reflection invites you to consider what you notice about how effortless communication feels with this person compared to relationships where you've had to constantly explain yourself. And whether that difference is showing you that struggling isn't a necessary component of real connection, but rather a sign of misalignment you've been tolerating because you didn't know better was available. You might be noticing that you're experiencing this person as bringing out sides of you others don't see. You could be picking up on yourself being funnier, more playful, more honest, more creative in their presence. Accessing parts of your personality that go dormant in other relationships. You might be sensing that you're more yourself with them than you are alone, which sounds paradoxical but actually makes sense because they create such safe space that defenses you maintain, even in solitude, can finally drop, and discovering who you are when you're not protecting yourself? Is revelation, this relationship, is giving you access to? What's also surfacing is that you could be dealing with a person whose presence calms your nervous system. You might be experiencing physical relaxation around them. Noticing that anxiety you carry loosens, that breath comes easier, that tension you hold releases. You could be picking up on somatic response that indicates safety at primal level. And trusting your body's wisdom about this person, even when your mind manufactures doubts, is an important practice because body doesn't lie the way thoughts do. Body registers actual safety versus performed safety. And your body knows this person is home. The vibrational signatures suggest you might be experiencing this relationship as teaching you about love you didn't know existed. You could be sensing that previous relationships were practice runs, necessary experiences that taught you what you don't want, that prepared you to recognize what you do want when it finally appeared. You might be picking up on all your past heartbreaks as having served purpose, as having cleared space for this particular person, as having developed capacity to receive kind of love you couldn't have appreciated without first experiencing what love isn't. What's significant is that you could be approaching a moment where you have to choose this person fully or release them fully. You might be sensing that ambiguity you've been maintaining isn't sustainable, that this connection is asking for commitment, for risk, for declaration of intention. You could be picking up on approaching threshold where you either step into this relationship with both feet or step back to protect yourself from vulnerability it demands. And that binary choice point is activating every fear and every desire you have around intimacy, around permanence, around allowing someone to matter this much. This reflection invites you to consider what you're actually afraid of losing if you commit fully to this person, and whether what you'd be giving up, options, illusion of control, protective distance, is actually worth more than what you'd be gaining, or whether you're overvaluing familiar defenses because unfamiliar intimacy feels too good to be trusted. Um, you might be picking up on this person having loved you from early stages of knowing you. You could be experiencing awareness that their feelings developed quickly, more quickly than they might have shown, that they recognized something significant about you and about potential between you before you were ready to acknowledge it. You might be sensing that they've been waiting with varying degrees of patience for you to catch up to clarity they reached earlier. And recognizing their consistency while you've been ambivalent or unavailable could activate guilt, but it's also information about their certainty, about depth of their investment, um, about seriousness of their regard for you. What I'm witnessing in the soul blueprints is that you could be dealing with a person who knows your wounds and doesn't weaponize them. You might be sensing that you've shared vulnerable parts of your history, your trauma, your shame. And instead of using that information against you in moments of conflict, this person protects it, honors it, holds it with care. You could be picking up on trustworthiness at fundamental level and discovering that yes, safe people actually exist, that not everyone will exploit your vulnerability. That's transforming your capacity to trust not just this person, but your own judgment about who deserves access to your tender places. The resonant frequencies suggest you might be experiencing this as relationship that challenges you to heal. You could be sensing that your typical defensive patterns don't work with this person, that strategies you've used to maintain control or distance in other relationships don't gain traction here. You might be picking up on being called into more authentic relating. And while that's uncomfortable because it requires you to show up without armor, it's also exactly the healing work you've needed to do. And this person is creating conditions where that healing becomes possible because they're not colluding with your dysfunction the way others have. What's also coming through is that you could be dealing with shared vision of future that feels aligned. You might be experiencing conversations about what you both want from life, revealing surprising compatibility, discovering that values, goals, desires mesh in ways that make partnership feel viable rather than sacrificial. You could be picking up on future with this person feeling expansive rather than constraining. And that sense of possibility, of being able to grow together rather than having to choose between relationship and individual development, is letting you imagine long term commitment without terror that you'll lose yourself. This reflection invites you to consider what specific fears about commitment with this person are based on actual evidence from how they treat you versus projections from past relationships or cultural messaging, and whether you're giving appropriate weight to reality of who this person actually is versus who fear tells you they might become. You might be noticing that you're experiencing resistance that doesn't match your actual desire. You could be picking up on part of you that wants to run, to create distance, to protect yourself from how much you're starting to care is less than #0. 5# is greater than, while deeper part of you knows this person is exactly what you've been asking for. You might be sensing internal conflict between wounded self that learned love equals pain and wiser self that recognizes this is different. And choosing which self to listen to, which voice to follow, is determining whether you move toward this person or away from them. What's pulsing through the destiny matrices is that you could be dealing with relationship that's meant to last. You might be sensing foundation here that's solid enough to build lifetime on, compatibility that goes beyond surface attraction to include emotional, intellectual, spiritual resonance. You could be picking up on this being person you're supposed to do life with, and supposed to, not in limiting sense of obligation, but in liberating sense of alignment, of this being path that serves your highest evolution, that brings out your best self, that creates context for you to become who you're meant to be. The harmonic convergences suggest you might be experiencing this person as loving parts of you others have found difficult. You could be sensing that traits previous partners criticized or merely tolerated are actually cherished by this person. That your intensity or your sensitivity or your quirks that made you feel like too much are exactly what draws them to you. You might be picking up on being celebrated rather than merely accepted, and experiencing someone who genuinely prefers you exactly as you are to any modified version is teaching you that right person doesn't require you to be different. They just appreciate difference between you and everyone else. So, as you navigate what you're feeling about this person who seems woven into your fate, Practice staying with truth rather than fear. You might be experiencing intense urge to protect yourself by leaving before you can be left, by rejecting before you can be rejected, by maintaining distance that prevents hurt but also prevents joy. But what I'm witnessing is someone on other side of that distance who's consistently showing up, who's demonstrating through behavior, not just words, that they're invested, that they're committed, that they're not going anywhere. Trust what you sense about this connection being special. You might be telling yourself you're romanticizing, that you're seeing what you want to see. But what if your heart knows something your guarded mind refuses to accept? What if the love you're sensing is actually available to you, and resistance to receiving it is habit formed in contexts where love wasn't safe, but this context is different, this person is different, and holding them at distance because past taught you not to trust is punishing them for crimes they haven't committed? You're meant to be with this person not because fate is removing your choice, but because your soul recognizes its match. You might be meant for each other in the sense that you're both ready for this, that you've both done enough healing to show up authentically, that you've both developed capacity for kind of relationship that serves growth rather than stagnation. Meant to be doesn't mean effortless, means worth the effort, means choosing each other consciously, repeatedly, through challenges that will inevitably arise. They've loved you from the start, or at least you've been sensing consistency in their regard that suggests deep feelings developed early. You might be picking up on how seriously they take you, how carefully they've considered what you mean to them, and their willingness to be vulnerable about that, to claim you, to show up persistently despite your ambivalence or your fear, deserves to be honored, not by obligating yourself to reciprocate feeling you don't have, but by being honest about feeling you do have, that you've been afraid to acknowledge. Nobody else fits like this person fits. You might know that already, might have known it from beginning, but been too scared to trust it. And that knowing, that deep recognition, that's not delusion. That's your soul speaking truth. Your ego wants to complicate. Listen to the simpler knowing. Listen to what your body tells you when you're with them. Listen to how you feel imagining future with them versus without them. And let that information guide you toward choice that serves who you're becoming rather than who you've been. This is it. This is the person. Stop running from what you've been asking for. They're here. Let them stay.